some weeks ago, somebody called me up and said, Rabbi, I would like to study with you the theology of humor. Now, I wasn't sure exactly what he meant. And unfortunately, he then said, and if you're not sure what that means, I don't know either, but I want to study it. So I started to dig around. It's not something that I ever particularly looked into before, though, in fact, I had thought, what makes something funny? Something I'd thought about in the past. Why is it that some things are funny and some things aren't? Why is it that we laugh? Where's laughter come from? So as I started to dive into it, I thought that maybe the best place to start is with the Hebrew root, sadi, chet, kuf. Matzchik in modern Hebrew means to make somebody laugh. Tzchok is laughter. And that's what I proceeded to do, and it opened up a whole amazing window of insight and something really profound that we'll get to in a little while. But the first thing I did before exploring Jewish texts, particularly with the root, sadi, chet, kuf, laughter, I wanted to understand from a psychological point of view, perhaps even philosophical point of view, what is humor? What makes something funny? Started to dig around, and I discovered something that I thought was very compelling and apparently is a widely accepted theory. And it's amazing what psychologists or other academics will make a living out of, right? They'll study, just pick out something that seems rather obscure and devote their life to the study of it. So there are psychologists, academics that study humor. There's even something called a humor research lab, believe it or not, in which there is a total devotion of great minds to the issue of what is the significance of laughter, what makes people laugh, what does it mean from an evolutionary perspective, etc. So hopefully Bruce sent out the source sheet. Is that true, Bruce?
The source sheet is attached to the chat.
Okay, excellent. Now, I wonder if it's worthwhile maybe doing a brief screen share here. Am I empowered to do a screen share?
Yes.
Okay. So let's just see if this works here. It's always a question. First, let me pull up on my screen the text that I want to send. So just give me a moment, please. Okay, now I'll do a screen share. Okay, everybody see that? It says benign violation theory.
Yep.
Okay, this is actually part of your source sheet, but for the people who don't have the source sheet, I think that the diagram is important. What you see in front of you is a diagram which is illustrating the current compelling theory of what makes something funny. Now, we have two circles here, and they intercept in the middle. One circle is called benign, and one circle is called violation. And when they intercept, that you have both those qualities of being benign and a violation, that's what makes something funny. And that's when you presumably laugh or chuckle or at least smile. Now, let's talk about what that means. I just want to give you a little heads up, and we'll see this in just a few minutes, about how amazingly this theory harmonizes with the way the great Torah scholars who investigated also the notion of laughter, how they basically say the exact same thing in their own words. You'll see that in a minute. Now, what's a violation? A violation is when the status quo is violated. And that could take all kinds of forms. So it could take the form of somebody threatening me. Now, threatening me, not in for it to be funny, it has to be also benign. It can't be something that actually frightens me. Right? So I'll give you an example. Let's say you have two kids that are play wrestling. Two kids. They're having a great time beating each other up. I have a feeling Bruce had a childhood like this. And they're laughing their heads off, right? Now, if one of them got angry and started to really punch out the other one, that's no longer benign. So the squeals of laughter and delight are going to turn into something else, because it may be a violation in the sense that there's something which is threatening the status quo, right? I'm sitting here nice, and all of a sudden someone's wrestling with me. So as long as benign, I can laugh. But if the person actually is trying to hurt me, that's no longer benign. So we don't have the coming together of something which is both a threat to the status quo, right, the violation, together with something that was benign. It has to have those two qualities. Interestingly enough, having someone tickle you. So why do you laugh when you're being tickled? It's because it's actually a kind of a form of violation too. Like there's somebody who's, tickling me. It's violating the status quo. It's something which is interrupting my normal and expected state of being. And it's benign, right? It's a tickle, okay? Fascinatingly, I hope this is true with all of you out there. Do you notice you can't tickle yourself? You ever think about that? You can't tickle yourself. Why? Because it's not a violation. A violation has to be something which is, an unexpected and sort of disturbance of the status quo. But you tickle yourself. That's not a violation. So it has to have those two qualities. It has to be a violation. It has to be benign. Okay? Now that violation can take all kinds of other forms. So, for instance, it can take the form of an expectation. So I would expect X to be true. That's my status quo. And all of a sudden, what I thought to be true is upset if it's in a benign way. So then I might laugh with glee. I got amazing good news. So it's a violation. It's a violation of what I thought was the status quo, right? I thought that I'm never going to be a millionaire, but nowadays millionaire is not very impressive. I thought I would never be a billionaire. And all of a sudden I win the lottery and I laugh with glee because it's a violation of my expectation, my default expectation of the nature of my reality. And it's also benign. Actually quite nice in that particular case. Or let's take a different form of something which generates laughter or humor. So what if I were to see an adult, and I'm making this up, it's actually a part of the example that these researchers gave. It's a kind of a bizarre example, but I'll use it. An adult wearing a diaper. Now, unfortunately, people get a certain age and incontinent, they may wear adult diapers. So we're not talking about a case like that. You know why, by the way, adult wearing a diaper like that is not funny? Because it's not benign, right? It makes us think about a very unpleasant future, which may be in store for us. So that's not benign. But let's say, it's a comic strip and it's a very virile young man who's wearing a diaper. well, that's a violation, right? Adults don't wear diapers. Normal, right? So, and it's benign, right? It's something funny, okay? An adult, let's say you dress up a child in a business suit. That's also funny because it's a violation of what's supposed to be, right? Babies don't wear business suits, right? Now, what about slapstick? Someone's walking down the street and they fall into a manhole. Okay. First, I never really liked slapstick very much, but somehow human beings think it's funny. Why is it funny? So it's funny if it's benign. Now, what makes it benign? I don't know the guy. He's not my brother, and he's not my sister. He's not my wife, and right. So it's something unexpected. It's a violation, right? He's walking along and he falls into a manhole. It's a violation, and it's benign because I have no intimacy with what's happening, no connection. It doesn't threaten me. Okay. However, Bruce, let me just finish. So
Okay.
now, what if it was a video of Kenny Kodesh falling into a manhole, right? God forbid, right? So it wouldn't be funny at all for him, that's for sure, and it wouldn't be funny for me because he's my bro. So right, that would be upsetting, right? So it's no longer benign; it's malign, right? Now, Mark Twain famously said, "What is humor? Tragedy plus time." Now, think of that for a second. What's tragedy? It's Kenny Kodesh falling in a manhole, right? But even Kenny Kodesh could laugh about it if it happened 15 years ago. I got to tell you this story, kids. When I was, 25 years old, and I was walking, I wasn't paying attention, and I fell into a manhole. And he could even laugh about it. I've heard people, and I'm sure you've heard this too, who talk about terrible things that have happened to them in their past. I happen to like, for reasons I don't want to get into right now, listening to lectures of people in Alcoholics Anonymous. I am not and have never been an alcoholic, in case you're wondering. But I find their talks extremely inspiring. They talk about their history. And inevitably, if you go online, these are amazing talks. Just look, Alcoholics Anonymous, and you listen to their talks. They tell their history. Their histories are horrible. You have people who, because of alcoholism, lost everything. They lost whatever worldly things they had. They lost their family, lost their job. They lost their health. They were skid row bums. And through amazing stories, they became sober and had a complete reversal of their life. They tell the stories, and they're cracking up. They're laughing out loud at these terrible things that happened to them, and the audience is laughing. I'll give you an illustration. It's unbelievable. It's a little risque. Arthur, you may have to edit this out. I couldn't believe when I heard this. One of the slogans which is used in Alcoholics Anonymous is, if you're a newcomer to a meeting, right? You decided you are an alcoholic and you better do something about it. You show up to an AA meeting, and you're supposed to do the following. This is an AA kind of principle. If you see somebody in that meeting who has what you want, right, sobriety, and you're willing to do anything to get it, sobriety, you're on your way, right? If you have that will, right? You see what somebody else has, and you want it, you'll go to any length to get it. And you go up to that person after the meeting, you say, can you be my sponsor and guide me to sobriety? So this guy's telling his story of what happened, that he was a terrible alcoholic and he went through a whole process of recovery. And he became a sponsor. Sponsor is when you're like a mentor for somebody else in the process of sobriety. So his sponsee, the guy that he was guiding, ran away with his wife. So the speaker said, I guess the guy was following the A principles. If you see somebody who has what you want and you go to any lengths to get it, you're on your way. The guy wanted his wife. He went to any lengths to get it, ran away with his sponsor's wife. Now, this obviously is a horrible story. But he was cracking up telling this story, and the audience was cracking up. Why? Because it was violation and it was benign. Now, it wasn't benign when it happened. It was what Mark Twain said, tragedy plus time. What made it benign was it was far enough in the distant past that he was able to now laugh at it. Okay. So those are the two qualities necessary that something be a violation of the status quo, either in assumptions or use of language. Why are puns punny? Why are puns funny? Because it's a violation of the norm of how you use language, right? And it's benign, right? That makes it funny, okay? So violation, benign, come together. That's what makes something funny. So if any of you are planning on becoming stand-up comedians, this may be something you want to keep in mind, that make sure when you tell a joke that it is a violation of some kind of norm, expectation of yourself, right? Like being tickled, right? And that it has to be benign. As soon as it's too close to you or too threatening, it's malign and it's no longer funny. Okay. Now, we're going to take this theory and let's dive into the text. And we're going to start with the first episode in the Torah in which we find the word tzchok, to laugh. It's funny. Maybe we'll just keep up the screen share here. Does that work for people? Is that a good idea?
If you can make it larger, I think it would help. Bruce.
Yeah, okay. Let's see here. I may have to go into the document itself to make it larger, which, let me just see what happens.
Hit the little plus mark on the bottom in this. There's like a magnifying glass and a plus mark. Hit the plus mark.
Yeah, let's see here.
Not on the menu bar, above the menu bar. It's this page.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it says add a comment. That's not that.
Huh?
I don't think that was it.
No, it's at the bottom of your screen, but above the at the bottom of your screen, you should see a floating bar.
Oh, well, I just see the task. It's weird. Yeah, I don't see it. Hide floating media control. No, that's not it. I mean, I could go in and enlarge the document. So give me a second. I'll do that. Okay. I'm not sure it's going to work. I might have to go out and come back in to do this. I can do that quick. Okay. So sorry for the lack of seamless viewer here, but hang on. Okay. Just do this real quick.
Tell jokes in the interim.
Yeah, let's see if you could say something which is a violation and benign.
All right. How about my wife divorced me for religious reasons. She worshipped money and I didn't have any.
Ah, excellent. Okay. Okay, so now do a screen share. Okay. And okay, how's that?
Bigger.
Yeah, good. Okay. Is that readable now? Matter of fact, yeah. Here, we can even do it even bigger. How's that? Yeah. Okay, great. Okay. So let's take a look what the Torah says. Vayipol Avram al panav vayitzchak. This is when Hashem told him, guess what? You're going to have a baby. So Avram fell on his face, not in a manhole. He fell on his face, and he laughed. Vayomer b'libo, and he said in his heart, Halaven mea shana yivale. Could somebody who is 100 years old have a baby? The im Sarah habat tishim shana peled. And regarding my wonderful wife, she's 90 years old. She's gonna have a baby. Okay. Now, in order to present the whole issue, we have to do the famous contrast with Sarah laughing. Now, it's not in the same episode. Right? This is God speaking directly to Abraham, giving him good news. And then a little bit later in the Torah, there's the episode of the three angels that come to Abraham, to his tent. And they then tell him, that promise from God is about to happen. Okay, so let's read how the Torah describes what happened then. But titzach Sarah b'kirba, and Sarah laughed within herself, Lamor, saying, Acharei veloti hayta li edna v'adoni zaken. After I'm so worn out, I no longer have the proper physiological process to have a baby, and my husband, he's really old. Okay, so she's laughing, right? Can't be. Vayomer Hashem el Avram. So Hashem said to Abraham, your wife in the tent over there, you know what I just heard her do? Lamuzet sachaka Sarah. How come Sarah laughed? Lemor saying, Afu name lebani zakanti. How can I have a baby? I'm so old. Hayipaleme Hashem davar. Is something too hard for Hashem? Something too miraculous for Hashem? Lemoed ashuv elecha. At the appointed time, I'm going to return to you. Ke'ed chaya. Year from now, u'l'Sarah ben. There's going to be a son for Sarah. Now, Avram then goes to Sarah and says, by the way, I know you were listening to this conversation with the angels when they said that we're going to have a baby. It's going to be in a year. And you laughed, and Hashem responded. What happened? So Sarah says to her husband, Sarah. So Sarah denied it. Lemor lo tzachakti, saying, I didn't laugh. Ki yireah. I was afraid. I'm sorry. Sarah, I did it wrong. And Sarah denied it. Lemor lo tzachakti. I didn't laugh. Ki yireah, for she was afraid. That's not part of the quote. That's a editorial comment. Lo ki tzachakta. And then Avram says, Vayomer, Avram says, you did laugh. Don't deny it. Okay. So it's a little confusing, that last exchange. We'll talk about more in a minute. Now, famous question. Why Avraham laughed, Sarah laughed, but a simple reading of those two passages seems to indicate that Avram's laughter was positive, and Sarah, at first glance, seems to be scolded for her laughter. Just want to point out something really interesting here. We're going to now take a look at Targum Unclus, my favorite Uncle Lewis, who is going to translate these two passages of laughter into Aramaic. So let's start with Avram laughing. Unafal Avraham al apoi. Avram fell on his face. V'chadti. And he, that verb there, chet dalid yud. Does anybody know a Hebrew word, this is Aramaic, but has that root? Chet dalid yud, or chet dalid vav. Vav and yud are the same thing. It's just a vav is a yud on testosterone. How about chedva? What does chedva mean? Chedva means joy. So that's what the Aramaic word here means. Avram fell on his face, and instead of the verb to laugh, that Hebrew word, right? It translates it, and he was joyous. The exact same word about laughter.
You didn't miss one.
With regards to the Sarah, look what it says here in the Aramaic. V'chayechat Sarah. You notice it uses a different verb, even though in Hebrew it's the exact same word, Sadi, Chet, Kuf. But with regards to Avraham, it's translated as Chet Daled Yud, to be filled with joy. With regard to Sarah, it uses a different root, Chet Yud, Chaf in Aramaic. Now, those of you who know modern Hebrew, L'chayech or chiyuch, what does that mean? Anybody? Right? To smile. In modern Hebrew means smile. Chiyuch. L'chayech, smile. So it's interesting that Targum Onkelos translates the exact same Hebrew word in different ways. With regards to Avram on the one hand, to rejoice. With regard to Sarah, she smiled, maybe smirked. Might be a better translation. Now watch this. Rashi, not surprisingly, follows the approach of Targum Onkelos. A lot of people ask the question, we have Rashi. Who did Rashi have? He had Targum Onkelos. Rashi starts with Targum Onkelos. That's the way Rashi always began learning Torah, Targum Onkelos. So let's look at Rashi. Yitzchak, with regards to Avram laughing, V'chadi quotes Targum Onkelos. V'tzchok shel Sarah, when Targum Onkelos translates the laughter of Sarah, it uses a different shorish, a different root, Chet Yud or Vav, Chaf. Lamada tish Avraham hemin v'samach. So you see from there, according to Targum Onkelos, Avram, he believed and he was filled with joy. That's why Targum Onkelos translated the laughter as joy with regards to Avram. V'Sarah lo emina. But Sarah didn't believe the news. The liglag means to mock or ridicule. So her smile, that Aramaic word, was a kind of smirk or mocking or ridicule. It's also kind of a smile, but it has very different implications. Okay, fine. Now, look at the Ramban. He starts out by quoting the approach of Onkelos, which we saw before. Now I'm going to skip down where it says Ulefi dati. In my opinion, this is how laughter works. Let's listen to Ramban. Think about the theory of benign violation. You need two things: something which is unexpected, impossible, violates a norm, an expectation, and at the same time is benign. And you need those two qualities. Now watch Ramban. Ulefi dati, in my opinion, shekavanah b'lashon hazeh, the intention in this language, ki kol ro'ed davar nifla, ba'adam letovlo yismach, ad yimalei schok piv. When you see something happen to a person which is nifla, the word nifla, people are used to translating that as wonderful, but it's not really a good translation. It does come from the word pella, which is better translated wondrous. What does wondrous mean? Something which goes beyond the norm of expectation. A pella can mean a miracle. You may have heard people say, pella plaim. That's another way of saying miracle of miracles. A miracle is a violation of the norms of nature. It's a violation of expectation. So if you see davar nifla, a wondrous, non-natural violation of expectation, that's happening to somebody, ba'adam. Now look what he adds. Litov lo. What's tov mean? For his benefit. Meaning, it has to be a pella, a violation of an expectation, of a norm, and it has to be litov lo. It has to be benign. Amazing. The Ramban begins his discussion in the very first sentence when he talks about Jewish humor, saying you need both those qualities. It has to be pella, a violation of a norm, right, of an expectation, and it has to be latov. Then a person will rejoice to the extent that their mouth will be full of laughter. Laughter is the physiological articulation. It's almost a kind of instinctive reaction to experiencing the combination of Pella, violation, and Tov, benign. If we respond to that by laughing. Okay, so that is his analysis of laughter, which is amazingly precisely the exact notion of the coalescing of these two factors of being a violation and being benign at the same time. Okay, now, what I want to do, especially since we got kind of a late start today, is now show you something mind-blowing and transformative. We're going to look at Rav Hirsch. Now, I have Rav Hirsch here in the Hebrew translation of the German. So I kind of felt sorry for you, and I was afraid you'd fall asleep if I were to read this and translate it because it's a long text. So I went through the trouble, and I just took a picture of the English translation, since in any case, it's a translation. So whether we're going to look at a Hebrew translation or an English translation, we'll probably get the right idea. By the way, as just a side point regarding Rav Hirsch, he wrote in German, as I mentioned. But I've heard many people say, who know German and know Hebrew, that the Hebrew translation of the German is nicer than the German. So, and it really is a beautiful. There are several Hebrew translations. There's two, as far as I know. The one that appears, excuse me, on the website Al HaTorah, which I think is the same one on Sefaria. That translation is the better translation, and it is mamash, sweet as honey. It's just a beautiful, beautiful Hebrew, nicer apparently than the German original. So now let's take a look at how Rav Hirsch explains this same episode. So we're starting here. I hope that you can see that. Maybe I should make that just, I can even make that bigger. Okay, I know it's a little dark, but we'll do our best. It has been thought that the only way to take by Yitzchak, like that Avraham laughed here, is an expression of joy. Who's Rav Hirsch quoting? Targum Onkelos, who translated it joy. Rashi translated it joy. And you should know, almost all the Rishonim translated as joy. But Yitzchak, he laughed. So joy. I think it's fascinating that, generally speaking, people who lived in the 19th century, like Rav Hirsch, don't really like to take on all the Rishonim, all the famous medieval commentators. Rav Hirsch had a lot of self-confidence, and he starts out by saying, all of the great commentators, Rashi, Ramban, etc., they all think it means joy. And he says, they're wrong. But the meaning of tzchok throughout the Tanakh by no means concedes this supposition. It's not true. Even sachak, it's the same word, by the way, sadi, chet, kuf, and sin, chet, kuf, l'sachek. I hope you can see how they're related, those roots. Okay? So even that root, which is the same root, is not really an expression of joy, but of laughter. It doesn't mean joy, it means laughter. And indeed, predominantly of jeering. It's a kind of almost negative, depreciative laughter, or a joke, or a game, but not actually joy. Joy is not the same emotion as litzchok. They're not the same. Now, you're going to see, he's going to explain this. But sachak is used without exception for ironic laughter. By the way, it's the first time I'm reading it in English. I learned it in Hebrew. I'm sort of hoping it's going to turn out the same. See what happens. Laughter that has in it a certain denying condemnation of the matter which excited the laughter. In the next verse, it says in exactly the same manner, referring to Sarah, v'titzchak Sarah. And this was certainly no expression of joy. Otherwise, she would not have denied it, nor have been reproached for it. Right? So the fact that she was sochek, exactly in Hebrew word, v'titzchak. If you say that that root means joy, then we don't understand what happened to Sarah, why she's criticized and Avram is not. So it must mean something else, right? And so he's saying it's some kind of response to irony. You're going to see this can end up being the same exact notion of benign violation, and you'll see how. Now, Rav Hirsch does what Rav Hirsch does. He's going to get linguistic, play around with the roots. So look at these roots. Sachak, right, to laugh. Sin chet kuf, which we just mentioned, which can mean to play, can also mean to laugh in certain places, apparently. Sa'ak, fascinating. The Hebrew root, sadi ayin kuf. You notice that sadi and kuf are in common with the two previous roots, which mean to laugh or to play. Only the middle letter is changed from a chet to an ayin. Chet and ayin are both guttural letters. They come from the same place in the throat. That's why, according to Rav Hirsch, sadi ayin kuf and sin chet kuf and sadi chet kuf, they're all derivative of the same basic notion. And he goes one step further, sha'ag. Now, that word sha'ag means to roar like a lion, to roar. So that also, Rav Hirsch claims, is also the same basic root, because we have a shin. Shin and sadi are also interchangeable. Gimel and kuf are also interchangeable. The reason things are interchangeable, Bruce is thinking, what do you mean interchange? Like, any letter can be changed. No, it has to do with where it's pronounced when you make the sound, what part of the throat. That's what makes letters exchange with each other. And then you have a middle aleph instead of the middle ayin or middle chet, which is also considered to be in the same class of letters, of these guttural letters. Nowadays, we don't pronounce the aleph, but at one time the aleph had a sound. And he says, so those roots are clearly phonetically related roots. But if you take a look at the standard meanings, it's a little hard to understand, because schok and schok can both mean laughter, maybe even joy, the way Targum Onkelos and Rashi understood it. Sounds somewhat positive. But sa'ak means to cry out. That's what God heard when the Jewish people were suffering in Egypt. God heard that word. They're crying out in pain. And sha'ag is a lion roaring. If you hear a lion roaring, unless he's behind bars, I think it's time to exit stage right or left. Right? It's scary. It's intimidating. So they don't seem in meaning to be similar. They're all sounds being emitted from the person or an animal, but for very different reasons. So look how he explains this. Still, they have apparently opposite meanings. Those with ayin and aleph as the middle letter mean to cry out, and those with chet to laugh. In what does the common underlying conception of these apparently completely different conceptions lie? Both are caused by noticing or feeling contrasts. That is, the pairing of unbecoming or incompatible objects. Rav Kook just said in German, translating to English, what term does this correspond to in terms of modern scientific theory about what makes somebody respond with schok? Pairing of unbecoming or incompatible objects. That's called violation. Two things that normally don't go together. That's a violation. Right? All of those words which have to do with this emotional, physiological response to a stimulus, either crying out or laughing or roaring or playing, which also has the sense of laughter. So those are when one confronts these two incompatible things. Now, remember the second quality you need for something to be funny? It has to be benign, not just two incompatible things. That's violation. It has to also be benign. Let's read on. Looked at objectively, they produce laughter. Subjectively, they produce pain and crying out. You know what he just said in his own words? If it's objective, meaning I'm not involved, it's Kenny Kodesh falling in the manhole. That's what he means by objective. I'm not involved. So that is benign. I laugh. If it's malign, right? I'm falling in, or my relative is falling in. And as a matter of fact, if Kenny fell in, that would be malign as far as I'm concerned. So you know what that is? That's malign, and therefore, Rav Hirsch says, that's sa'ak or sha'ag, crying out, roaring. So this is amazing, the way Rav Hirsch understands these four Hebrew roots, fitting exactly into this contemporary psychological theory, that in order for something to be funny, it has to be both violation and benign, so much more so that the difference between being benign and malign is preserved in the Hebrew by simply changing the middle root letter. So sachak would be to laugh when it's benign. Sa'ak, when the chet changes to an ayin, is when the event or experience is malign, and then you cry out. An amazing notion of seeing how these Hebrew verbs work, exactly mapping out on this contemporary theory of benign violation becoming malign, and the way Hebrew navigates that transition by taking the same root and converting the middle root letter from, for instance, chet to an ayin. Tzchok, tzachak versus za'ak or tza'ak. Amazing. Okay. I hope this is like not confusing anybody. This is really amazing Torah here. Okay. Now he goes on. Noticing such a contrast on something which is dissociated from oneself, right? It's over there. Like Mark Twain said, tragedy plus time. Or which at any rate has no relation to us at the moment, right? It's in the far distance, makes us laugh. But a ridiculous contrast, violation, affecting ourself, no longer benign. Or someone with whom we identify ourselves, Kenny Kodesh, my brother, pains us and makes us cry out. It's no longer benign, it's malign, and it's sa'ak instead of sachak. A small child in a full-bottom wig, right? Children don't wear wigs. A gray-haired, hang on a second, old man dressed as a baby, it's like the diaper example, right? Causes laughter. Violation, benign, funny. Especially so the complete disproportion, the complete incongruity of the expectation of an undertaking or of a performance in the means available for it, or the performance to the expectation, meaning a violation of what I'm supposed to do or what's supposed to be with what is. He gives an example of that. To want to empty out the sea with a nutshell, or a grown-up person toddling like an infant, providing we do not participate in the shame by feeling ourselves identified with him, in which case we should cry out, all cause laughter. Violation, benign, laughter. Violation, malign, sa'ak, crying out. Okay, excellent. Now, we're going to skip to the next paragraph. See if we can make this just a bit larger. Are you still with me there? It's visible? In any case, sachak is produced only by noticing something which strikes as ridiculous. What's ridiculous mean? These two things don't go together. It's a violation. Something which is absurd, cannot be. In Ramban's language, pella cannot be, pella. First, and it has to be litov, language of Ramban, has to be benign. But where in the world is there any greater absurd contradiction, ridiculous absurdity, than the expectation that a 100-year-old man and his 90-year-old wife, who have never had a child in the course of their long married life, now, practically at the end of their lives, should get a son. That's why Yitzchak is so chake. He's laughing because he's confronting absurdity, meaning violation of what should be. They're too old. They never had a baby till then. Cannot be. Violation of expectation, violation of laws of nature, violation of a norm. And obviously in this case, it's good news. It's benign. What's the response? Schok. Okay, now let's go on. And then to expect a great world-conquering nation to arise. That's us, by the way. World-conquering nation. I'm not sure I should say this out loud because it might play into conspiracy theories that we're out to conquer the world, especially using lasers in order to set California forests on fire. You know that Jews do that kind of thing. Okay, so to expect a great world-conquering nation to arise, to place the hopes of the whole future of mankind, which is our job. The whole future of mankind is dependent upon the Jews. This is Rav Hirsch, right? L'takein olam. We're here to fix the world. And to place the whole hopes of mankind on this late-born only child. Right? Think about this historically. The world is a mess. God is going to save the world. So he creates the Jewish people. And the future of the nation depends upon Abraham having an heir to that mission. Who's that heir? Yitzchak. Well, that heir doesn't show up until Yitzchak and Sarah are too old to have babies, and they've been trying up till now, and with all the great infertility treatments available to science, nothing's worked. That's absurd. It's ridiculous. Whose very existence was not to be expected. Right? Yitzchak was not expected. It was too late already. And in any case would be early orphaned. Like, even if they were to have a baby, you know, Baruch Hashem, my wife and I have a nice brood of children. And our last children, like, I still, believe it or not, even though I have 12 grandchildren, I also have a son who's 18 years old. You know, I sometimes think, like, what am I going to look like when he has his children? They're going to wheel me up under the chuppah and say the bracha, right? So that's what Hirsch is saying. Even assuming that Sarah had a baby, how long is Avram going to be around to teach Yitzchak about his mission in life, which is to create a nation to save the world? Presumably, Avram and Sarah are going to croak when Yitzchak is still a baby, at least a young child. So how is the salvation of the world supposed to emerge from that? Ridiculous, absurd, violation of any sense of what is reasonable. Absurd. That surely, Rav Hirsch continues, is only taking the ordinary natural course of events into consideration an absolute absurdity. It's a violation. Placing the very greatest expectations of world salvation on the very smallest, almost non-existent beginning. Absurd. How does one respond to absurdity? Schok. Schok is the physiological, audible response to the confrontation with absurdity, violation, combined with being benign. Let's do one more paragraph. This contrast was so great that even an Avraham, with all his full confidence in God, as was shown by falling on his face, could not help schok, laughing at the absurdity of the idea of himself and Sarah still getting a baby. And this laughter was and is so important that it is again brought into prominence with Sarah. She also responds with schok, and was to be perpetuated for all future generations in the name of the promised child, Yitzchak. Think about this, is crazy. It's absurd that Abraham responds to schok when presented with this scenario of the impossibility of having an heir who continue with his mission. Sarah responds with schok at the same news. And somehow this is so significant that the product of that promise, this baby, is going to be called Mr. Laughter, Yitzchak. Why is this so significant? Why is this so central to Jewish self-understanding and our sense of who we are in the world and our destiny? For that, we will have to wait a week. Do not sleep until then. I won't be able. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you. See you next week.